weekly Savitri. And today it is so packed with beauty and power that we will have to take it quite slowly. I have page, let me get my glasses. We are on page 18. And we are beginning with have to go down. Where are we? Page 18. We ended last time with guard the wheels circling immobility. So pain with its lash and joy with its silver bribe, which we've already spoken about, tend to guard this circling immobility of the wheel. But now Sri Aurobindo continues, and he says a bond is put on the high climbing mind. Well, do we know what a bond is? It's something that ties one or binds one to something. So this mind that would like to climb higher, it would like to go into realms that are even above the ordinary mind, it is tied by this bond and a seal. So we have a bond first, which is a tie, and then a seal is put on the too large, wide open heart. And finally, there's a semicolon there. And finally, we see that death stays the journeying discoverer life. And all of us know that, because in our lifetimes, we have seen death. Many of us have experienced death. So, first of all, a bond is put on our aspiration to climb higher and higher through our mind into the levels that are far above the mind. And those levels we know from Sri Aurobindo are higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, eventually even reaching to the overmind, and finally the supermind. We have to break that bond, and we have to break that seal on our too large, wide open heart, because those of us who have met Mother and Sri Aurobindo, or who have come to them without seeing them physically, already have a wide open heart. And then coming in the way all the time is death, who stays, in other words, holds back this journeying discoverer, which is life. Thus is the throne of the inconscient safe. Now, we're going to take a lot of time today on certain terms. And the first term will be the inconscient. And we will hear, I can't read it all because it would take me half an hour to read everything Sri Aurobindo has said about it. But I'll read a few things. The inconscient and the ignorance may be mere empty abstractions and can be dismissed as irrelevant jargon if one has not come in collision with them or plunged into their dark and bottomless reality. But to me, they are realities, concrete powers whose resistance is present everywhere and at all times in its tremendous and boundless mass. That is from his letters on Savitri. And I'll read one or two more. This one from his letters on yoga. In its actual cosmic manifestation, the Supreme, being the infinite and not bound by any limitation, can manifest in itself, in its consciousness of innumerable possibilities, something that seems to be the opposite of itself, something in which there can be darkness, inconscience, inertia, insensibility, disharmony, and disintegration. It is this that we see at the basis of the material world and speak of nowadays as the inconscient. The inconscient ocean of the Rig Veda, in which the One was hidden and arose in the form of the universe, or as it is sometimes called, the non-being, Asat. And lastly, this is from Letters on Savitri. Again, men have not learned yet to recognize the inconscient on which the whole material world they see is built, or the ignorance of which their whole nature, including their knowledge, is built. They think that these words are only abstract metaphysical jargon flung about by the philosophers in their clouds, or labored out in long and wearisome books like The Life Divine. So there is also Sri Aurobindo's great sense of humor. Or labored out in long and wearisome books like The Life Divine. I could read much more to you, but we have so much more to cover. So we see that a bond is put on this high climbing mind, a seal on our too large, wide open heart, and death stays life, life which is the journeying discoverer. And thus is the throne of the inconscient safe, while the tardy coilings of the eons pass, and the animal browses in the sacred fence, and the gold hawk can cross the skies no more. So when I was young, and I didn't know many of these terms, I would go to Nolini, or to Amal Kiran, or to Madhav Pandit, and later even to Alok. And they would give me their answers, which I'm going to share with you now, because the animal, Nolini says, is the vital physical consciousness personified. And we have the full term, the animal browses in the sacred fence. That's our word, that's our line. And the animal browses in the sacred fence. Well, here's what Alok had to say. The material world, more specifically the human body, is the sacred fence. And that is absolutely correct. A yajna for the gods to descend. But the forces of death and darkness have usurped and occupied the field now. And instead of the divine whose law must establish itself here, instead of a divine life intended for earth, the sacred place meant for the gods has become a field for the play of an ignorant animal consciousness, hardly awake and half dead. It is this ignorant and obscure consciousness that is being termed as the animal. Now, when I asked Amal this, and I did this over many years, you're all aware of Amal Kiran, K.D. Setna, who was a great poet who wrote some 40 books. He said, the phrase, the animal browses in the sacred fence, connotes the defilement of the psycho-spiritual nature by one's lower vital being. And then Madhav says, the animal represents the lower rajasic nature. The sacred fence is the human being with all its scaffolding. That's quite a bit on one line, but Vladimir, if you have something to add, please do.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that animal is with capital A, if you look at it.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's not just the animal of a lower kind, it is something more than that. It is the Pashu of the Veda, which Aurobindo translates as beings which possess the perception. Yeah? The consciousness is present, inbuilt already in the physical body. So these are conscious beings who have perception, but they are framed in the specific type of species which is not permitting them to express themselves in mental terms or, the words. So they don't speak our language, but they have consciousness. And so all this world is animated by anima, by some kind of presence of the spirit, the soul, and they are all somehow evolutionary, helping the soul to evolve through species to species. So this view on animal can be quite different. It could be like all conscious beings, all beings who embodied consciousness. They browse within the sacred fence. And notice sacred fence. It's not just fence which is fencing us away. It is a sacred fence. There is something very sacred there in this framing us into this particular species, into this particular body, and the development of certain consciousness within.
Well, okay. I feel that the sacred fence is this human body.
Yeah.
Because the human body is the latest in the evolutionary movement towards the divine body. Now, capitalizing animal, I think Sri Aurobindo is calling attention to the genus of the species, the animal man, and he's calling attention to it by capitalizing it also. And then he continues with, and the gold hawk can cross the skies no more. Well, there's a lot to tell you on that, so we'll pick that up now.
And can I ask you something for the grammar usage of
Yes.
death stays, the journey
Yes.
discover a life. Stays is like stands, like we
It holds back.
holds back.
To stay something. When the divine stays the divine mother on his chest, he holds her there. He holds her there on his chest. When something is stayed, it is held back. And that's what's happening here. Now to the gold hawk, because this is very important, very important. Notice that Sri Aurobindo capitalizes the H of hawk. Okay, Alok says, the hawk, the gold hawk, is the soul, or the psychic being. It also represents the powers and forces of the intuitive mind that descend from the supramental heights and enter the human mind. Amal has a little different take on it. He says the gold hawk is the spiritual mental being. Nolini says the hawk is a symbol of the vital. The gold hawk is the vital soul transformed. And Madhav says gold represents truth, divinity. The hawk is the high-soaring bird, the soul embodied in higher nature. Well, this tells us something, I think, of great importance, that even these people who are highly evolved have different understandings of Savitri. And for me, I can tell you personally that every time I have read Savitri, something new came to me. Some new understanding, some new vision, but not in the mind, through the heart, into the soul. And for me, that has been one of the most beautiful things of Savitri, because until we are fully divinized, we will not be able to understand Savitri fully. So we've done a few lines, and now we have, but one stood up and lit the limitless flame. So now we have to go into the word flame, because there's a lot here. Sri Aurobindo says, Agni is the leader of the sacrifice and protects it in the great journey against the powers of darkness. The knowledge and purpose of this divine puissance can be entirely trusted. He is the friend and lover of the soul and will not betray it to evil gods. Even for the man sitting far off in the night, enveloped by the darkness of the human ignorance, this flame, Agni, is a light which, when it is perfectly kindled, and in proportion as it mounts higher and higher, enlarges itself into the vast light of the truth, flaming upward to heaven to meet the divine dawn. It rises through the vital or nervous midworld and through our mental skies and enters at last the paradise of light, its own supreme home above, where joy is forever in the eternal truth that is the foundation of the sempiternal bliss. The shining immortals sit in their celestial sessions and drink the wine of the infinite beatitude. Lastly, Mother says in her questions and answers, if you go deep enough into a sufficiently complete silence from all outer things, you will find within you that flame about which I often speak. And in this flame, you will see your destiny. You will see the aspiration of centuries, which has been concentrated gradually to lead you through countless births to the great day of realization. That preparation which has been made through thousands of years and is reaching its culmination. Oh my gosh. It is reaching its culmination. So this tells us immediately what Mother has often said to us, that all of us who are here now, listening to Savitri, aspiring to do the integral yoga, have been with her many, many births previously. When I went to Mother and brought my first wife, Annie, to meet her, it was on Annie's birthday, on the 18th of December, and it was 1968, the year of the foundation of Aurobindo. And Mother looked at her and she said, "This is not the first time we have met. You have been with me many times before, many, many times." Oh, what that meant to me, my goodness, to hear Mother say this. Now, regarding the flame, I may have had a little spark in me that Mother said was my consecration, but she put that fire in me, and that flame rose from my heart, rose higher and higher and higher, until it was a huge conflagration, and it didn't burn me. But its power was so vast that I fell to Mother's feet, and I must have wept for 10 minutes. Arraigned by the dark power that hates all bliss. Now we have to understand that when someone is arraigned, they are called before a court to answer certain charges. Now, what are these charges that this force is arraigning, this dark power that hates all bliss is arraigning the soul in the dire court where life must pay for joy? Well, something dire is something dreadful, something terrible. Now, sentenced by the mechanic justicer. A justicer is a judge or a magistrate. So we see that one stood up. That one obviously is Savitri. And she stood up and she lit the limitless flame. But she was arraigned by the dark power. She had to answer charges that hates all bliss. Now, we just read what Sri Aurobindo told us, that the divine can manifest himself in any way at all. So evil is also the divine. Evil working out towards good. Hate working out towards love. Death working out towards eternal life and a divine life. So Savitri stands up, she lights the limitless flame, and she finds that she's called before this court by this judge or magistrate that hates all bliss, sentenced by him, and she's in this court where life must pay for joy. What an extraordinary statement, that life must pay for joy. And we all find that joy is ephemeral. It doesn't last. It's often met by sorrow or suffering or pain, grief. So she has to pay for joy. And then on the first line on page 19, sentenced, first of all, the last line in page 18, sentenced by the mechanic justicer to the afflicting penalty of man's hopes. Something that is afflicting is grievously painful. If we are afflicted with the disease, it's extremely painful. Now she is afflicted grievously with the penalty of man's hopes. But her head she bowed not to the stark decree. She did not bare her heart, her helpless heart, to destiny's stroke. Well, it seems to be helpless now, but so bows and must the mind-born will in man, obedient to the statutes fixed of old, because these are the old laws, the old established laws of God. And man is obedient to them. We could say they may be sometimes good, they may sometimes seem evil, but they are fixed statutes, fixed laws. And even we admit without appeal these lower gods. How often have we admitted, without even thinking about it, an evil thought, a thought against someone, a thought inharmonious, unbeautiful, but not Savitri, not Savitri. Savitri, he says, in her, the superhuman cast its seed. Yes, it cast its seed. Now you have to remember that we're only in Book 1, Canto 2. Savitri has not yet realized that she is the Divine Mother. So the superhuman has indeed cast its seed in her. And we'll go just 2 more lines, and then if there are any questions, we can discuss them. Inapt to fold its mighty wings of dream, her spirit refused to hug the common soil. There's a few more. Or finding all life's golden meanings robbed, compound with earth, struck from the starry list, or quench with black despair the God-given light. Now, inapt means not inclined to. So someone who is inapt to do something, they're not inclined to do something. So Savitri is inapt to fold her mighty wings of dream. And her spirit refuses to hug the common soil, or finding all life's golden meanings robbed, compound with earth, struck from the starry list. Now, this word compound, when I was, in my early 20s, I couldn't understand it. I went to Nolini and I said, Nolini, what is this compound with earth? He says, to mix with. So she's not going to mix with earth and therefore be struck from the starry list. She's not going to quench with black despair the God-given light. This passage is so marvelous. It's only some 20 lines or something, and yet it takes us so deeply into ourselves and begins to give us the picture of Savitri's soul and her strength and the mother's strength who would not give in, and even at the very end of her life, she asked her servants to carry her. "Let me walk," she said, "let me walk." They wouldn't do that because they felt she would die, but she wanted to walk when her body, according to Dr. Bisht, was too weak to make 100 years. But Mother was the Divine Mother, an aspect of Savitri, and she is continuing her work in the subtle physical to bring forth with Sri Aurobindo the supramental manifestation and the supramental body. And all of us will see that and join with her one day in this marvelous new dawn that is to come. Namaste all. If you have any questions, please ask them now. So I would like to read it fully again. A bond is put on the high climbing mind, a seal on the too large, wide open heart. Death stays the journeying discoverer, life. Thus is the throne of the inconscient safe, while the tardy coilings of the eons pass, and the animal browses in the sacred fence, and the gold hawk can cross the skies no more. But one stood up and lit the limitless flame, arraigned by the dark power that hates all bliss, in the dire court where life must pay for joy, sentenced by the mechanic justicer to the afflicting penalty of man's hopes, her head she bowed not to the stark decree, bearing her helpless heart to destiny's stroke. So bows and must the mind-born will in man, obedient to the statutes fixed of old, admitting without appeal the nether gods. In her the superhuman cast its seed, inapt to fold its mighty wings of dream. Her spirit refused to hug the common soil, or, finding all life's golden meanings robbed, compound with earth, struck from the starry list, or quench with black despair the God-given light. Next week we will see so much more of Savitri's confrontation with these forces, and it will be as powerful as what we've read today. Thank you all for attending.